And she's like, yeah. And I'm go, oh, it's her. She went to all your track meets and she's running next to you, cheering you on. She's like, yeah, she did that all the time. So it comes through as like, just, you see actions, you see, different symbols or literal things. And then it's just a matter of not interpreting them with your own experience and your own dogma, and leaving religion and spirituality out of it, really. And it's just about you connecting to that person on that level.
Today's guest is Joseph Leposa. Joseph Leposa is the creator and voice behind Humanfluence, a platform dedicated to decoding the hidden layers of reality.
So I found out about the whole holographic universe theory from a CIA declassified paper called the Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, which was, this goes into ESP and psychic phenomenon.
The soul. As a jail deputy, Joe has spent years face-to-face with the shadows of society. It was in that environment, surrounded by suffering, silence, and raw human energy, that his psychic and mediumistic abilities unexpectedly awakened. And now for my conversation with Joe Leposa.
Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality. Today I'm speaking with Joe Leposa of the Humanfluence podcast and an author. So welcome, Joe. I'm excited to have you on. I'm a fan of your podcast and work too.
Thank you, Liz. You as well. I've been listening to you for quite a while, and all of your guests I resonate with. And like we were saying before the podcast, I found you not from a standpoint of grief, but through skepticism and trying to learn more about all of these different topics. They're not so mainstream, but are becoming more mainstream now, which is really exciting.
So what got you started and interested in exploring these topics, especially if it wasn't grief?
For sure. Well, my life has been filled with weird happenings, whether it's deja vus, synchronicities, things that are just too strange. What the fucks that leave you questioning, like, what is reality? There's more to this. And then there's the whole, I came from an upbringing of a little bit of trauma, not as bad as others, of course, but my own journey it's relative. And growing up with a stepdad that was abusive and in a household like that, you grow more character and you question things more because it's like, why is this happening? And life is supposed to be good, and why is there such duality, So all these things throughout my life led me to a career as a deputy in a jail, which at one point I wanted to be a cop. I never thought I'd end up a deputy in the jail. But that really led me down this rabbit hole of my own experiences of deja vu synchronicity turned into me picking up on what is called energy, people's emotions. I could sense them, feel them. I would just know things about people if they were going through something. And being in that environment, it being a jail, you're around negativity everywhere. So I was bombarded by all this, and that's what led me to look into like psychics and energy work and that type of stuff, which can be very woo-woo, but at the same time, I'm like, there's got to be something tangible to this. With all of these practices, there's got to be something tangible. So I signed up for a intro to psychic medium course, and that's when my life flipped all the way upside down. But I'll pause there. I know I went into a lot.
Oh my God. I'm going to have so many questions. I'm also at some point going to want to get into, I hadn't realized about your work in jails, kind of about darkness in people and what makes people do bad things, any insight you have in that. But, before we go there, actually, I want to ask about the psychic class. Had you had any inkling of abilities or interest in this stuff as a child or prior to this class? How did you even choose to go that route?
That's a great question. Before I even signed up for this class, I was a hopeful skeptic, I guess you would say. I know my own experiences of just knowing things, and I'm like, there's got to be something to this. But I thought it was just like intuition. I considered myself to have a strong intuition. So when I went to this class and we started to do these exercises, whether they were, the teacher holding a photo that you can't see and you write down impressions of it, and then, you reveal what it is and you compare your notes to it. Right off the bat, we did those, and I was like spot on with what was on the images. And I'm like, okay, maybe those deja vu synchronicities, my dreams that have come true, years later after having them, which I want to touch upon too, because that's a big part of my story. All of that was actually something that was real. And maybe I'm actually psychic. And then we're all a little psychic. It's just how much you train it and how much you tap into these abilities, as they say.
So you said then before taking the class, you'd had some experiences, dreams that came true, deja vu. Yeah. I want to hear the biggest what the fuck of that and the very first time you had that.
For sure. Let me go to the big what the fuck first, because that's what led to me creating Humanfluence, which was about 1.5 years ago. And about a year prior to that is when near-death experiences became really popular on YouTube and out in the mainstream a little more. And I dove right down that rabbit hole. Growing up, I wasn't really in a religious household, but like my brother-in-law is a pastor. My sister's always gone to church. And I went to church a few times with my aunt. She's big in the church, but I never considered myself religious, but I was always into the spiritual side of things. So Humanfluence is a big part of that, spirituality and religion and how those merge. But anyways, so NDEs, that's what I was saying. So NDEs became really popular. And then during this time, I was at the jail working, and a dream I had had 7 years prior to that, which I can dig into if you want. I can tell you the details of it if you'd like.
Yes, please.
So before I was working in the jail, I worked as a data center technician for Yahoo in Lockport, New York. And I was working there at the time I had this dream 7 years prior. And I'm in like our equipment closet with one of my coworkers, and it's we're talking, and then I look up, and there's like skylight windows, and up in the sky there's, instead of stars, they're all crescent moons with sickle and hammers in them. Very strange. So I'm like, what is that, to my friend? And I'm like, let's go outside. So I go outside, and they're still all in the sky everywhere, just crescent moon with sickle and hammer everywhere. Then my friend's gone, and this white horse walks up to me. And at this point, I became lucid. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with lucid dreams. I have an ebook on them for anyone interested. It's basically you're consciously aware you're dreaming in the dream state, and you can control your dreams. So I became lucid, and I'm like, I'm going to get on this horse and fly. And right as I do that, my best friend is next to me. He doesn't have a horse. He's just standing there. And then we both take off flying into the sky. And mind you, it was a really stormy sky, clouds, thunder, rain, all that. And my buddy starts flying up and away, and he's out of sight. I can't see him anymore. And then I'm back down on the ground, and I'm staring. The horse is gone, and I'm staring at this field of wheat. And mind you, the whole like landscape of this is like that sepia tone, that like brownish, yellowish tone. I don't know if you're familiar, which is important to keep in mind because every detail of a dream is symbolic in some way, whether literal or metaphorical. So I had that dream, and I woke up. I was like, it was so vivid, and it was a lucid dream, so you remember them more. And I actually told my stepfather about this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this dream, blah, blah, blah. And this has stuck with me ever since. So fast forward years later, I keep seeing this white horse. It keeps like reoccurring throughout my life at like pivotal points when I'm like questioning where I'm going. Like a white horse shows up in some fashion.
Like a live white horse or just anything?
Yes.
Like a dream, a photo, anything?
For example, my wife went to grad school 2 hours away, and I was very sad that she was going away, and I had to commute and all this. And first time I'm driving over almost to the town she was in, there's this huge white horse statue, like right there in the middle of a farm. Like it wasn't a horse farm either. This is like potato farms. That's just one example. There's about 10 other. Now, fast forward to the time when, before I created Humanfluence, that when I started in the jail, this white horse and the wheat and my buddy flying off all came into like fruition. And here's what I mean. My buddy, Matt, he actually moved to New York. Well, he moved to Nashville at that time. Now he's in New York City. He was in DC. So he moved away and he hasn't been back home since. One aspect of that dream, my buddy going off, that's multi-layered. I'll get back to that. The second part is the wheat. We ended up moving to a house right when this is all happening. And I'm jumping ahead because that's really important. The other part of that was the whole working at Yahoo. This is where it all comes back together. Sorry. So I'm at the jail. I'm having all these negative experiences and I couldn't make sense of them. And this is before the psychic course and all this. I was basically lost. I was going to go back to Yahoo. They offered me a lot more to come back. And I was like, I got to jump on this. Then it fell through. And this is what led to like my dark night of the soul. Some call it, you can call it rock bottom. But this is when I was like, what is going on? At the same time, I'm seeing this white horse everywhere. My buddy moved again. And then we moved houses. And I'm driving a way that I haven't gone before. And I pass cornfields with like what looks like, the brown wheat stalks. And then there's a sign that says Town of Wheatland. And I'm like, that's odd. Okay. Then I go to the stop sign, not a quarter mile up the road. I look on my right. It's a horse farm and there's a white horse right there. And then I just something tells me to look up, and I look up at the clouds and it's like a white horse in the clouds. Now I know clouds can look like anything, but it was like a white horse in the clouds. So I got a white horse here, a white horse here, the wheatland, my buddy moving, Yahoo falling through. It was like all this came to life from a dream 7 years ago. And there's more layers to that too in my own personal life, but just to show you how dreams unfold in the most mysterious ways, they don't make sense, and they're all unique and personal.
And I mean, that's a dream from 7 years ago, and you remember it so vividly. And I mentioned lucid dream. Do you normally remember your dreams like that? Did you wake up and it just was a completely different experience than other dreams? And if so, I know you said lucid. I'd like a little explanation of how and what exactly that was like.
For sure. So I got interested in lucid dreamings around the time that I had this dream. I had been trying to have them. I'd had a couple before that. And for anyone interested, it's so fun. You can do more than just do fun things in your dreams. You can talk to your subconscious or unconscious mind. Like, your dream characters are figments of you. So whatever you ask them, whatever they respond with is like, it's interesting to see what they'll say. Also, you can like practice skills in your lucid dreams, which is another cool thing. But I decided that I was going to fly, and that's usually a thing that I do because it's fun. But I'm sorry, what was your question?
Like the physiological experience, what your other dreams were like. It's interesting that you remember this one. So some of the differences, like, do lucid dreams feel, do you know you're dreaming during them? Does it feel as realer than real the way an NDE is? I just have no concept of the experience of what a lucid dream would actually be like, even if I intellectually know what the definition is.
For sure. So I would say we all have vivid dreams, those dreams that you just really remember. And those are usually the ones that, you know, your mind is really telling you to pay attention to. You know, it's not just your brain filtering the day and consolidating memories and everything that it does while you sleep. But then you have lucid dreams, which usually come out of vivid dreams because you're just more aware. But the best way to initiate a lucid dream is to basically question: Are you dreaming while you're awake during the day? So you can have reality checks, is what they're called, and you could do them. If you keep a dream journal, you can tailor your reality checks around symbols in your dreams, so that when you dream about that, you can do a reality check in your dream, and it'll trigger it. But a reality check is basically like holding your nose and closing your mouth and trying to breathe. Can you breathe? Or putting your finger through your hand. Or the one that works best for me is counting your fingers. So throughout the day, you could set alarms or whatever. Count your fingers on your hands and really question, like, is this a dream? And what'll happen is when you're dreaming, all of a sudden, what happens for me most of the time is my hands just pop up in front of my face, and I have like 8 fingers on one hand, and they're all disfigured or something. And I'm like, oh, I'm in a dream. And at that point, you can practice maintaining the lucid dream for a longer amount of time because they fade very fast, especially if you're excited. But it's a very visceral experience. Like, it's like waking reality, but you know you're in a dream. But yeah, like, you have a dream body, like everything's there. It's just, you know, you're in a dream.
And what do you think they are? You know, there's so many theories of what dreams are. And are there differences between lucid dreams and others? For example, are dreams just you processing information from the day? Is it your subconscious? Are you actually out of body and communicating with other dimensions or other parts? You know, as there's theories, we're living multiple parallel lives now and you're jumping between them. I mean, there's so many fascinating theories of what dreams are. So what do you think they are?
Yeah, they're a little bit of all of that. You know, think about it. Our brain has to heal and rest from the day, and we have memory and we have to consolidate all that. So that's one aspect of it. But dreams on a deeper level are related to like your brainwave states. And when you look into that, especially the theta and the gamma, when you're real low, you go through every stage of sleep or every brainwave state during your sleep. Like psychics, for instance, they're in that theta range more of the time, and that's been tested. And it's kind of that daydreaming state. But when you're in a really low, slow vibratory state of sleep, something in the brain, I don't know, you can connect, or I don't know the best word, but tune in or whatever to these states of consciousness. Now, whether they are other dimensions, whether they are part of us, part of our mind, you know, that's up for debate. That's the never-ending question. I think we're getting closer to continuity of consciousness than we are to like where we go when we dream, so to speak, because at least that's like a final state. Whereas like you have like astral projection, you have lucid dreams, you have all of these different phenomenon. Deceased loved ones visiting you in dreams. That when it's a very vivid experience, I'd like to say that's real. If you feel like it's real and you remember it and it feels really real, based on my own mediumship and what I've experienced, yeah, those things are real. So I don't know where they are. They're all here. They're all there. I don't know. It's hard to say, but if it's all energy and it all comes back to energy, whether we're connecting with a loved one in a dream, whether we're, having an out of body experience, is that our astral body? Is that it's an energetic state? So the science on it is confusing, and I don't have it all put together yet, but I know that these things are possible, and we're getting closer to bridging what ancient cultures have said about spirituality and whatnot is merging with modern quantum physics and science, which is really cool.
Yeah, I find that fascinating too. And so you were giving that example of your dream very shortly, or I guess 7 years before taking the psychic class, or seven years before taking the psychic class, or 7 years before now? 7 years before the class. Okay. And you described that as one of the biggest what the fucks and the way it came true. Now, what was the first weird inclination you had that there's more than this material world? Or first weird semi what the fuck? First what the fuck?
I'd have to say it was the course I took because, like I said, I was a hopeful skeptic going into it. I had, at that point, listened to probably 100 NDE accounts. And what interested me most about those was how religion wasn't part of them and how, this returning to source, heaven, whatever you call it, is universal. Sorry. It's a universal thing across many different cultures, belief systems, and whatnot. And I interviewed John Burke, and he wrote the book Imagine the God of Heaven. And what was really interesting about his take on it was he is a pastor. So he was looking at over 1,000 NDEs from a standpoint of scripture. So for instance, he talked about how people describe entering bright realms and meeting loved ones and all of the things that are universal among other NDEs and how they're in the Bible. But I digress. But so when I took this psychic medium course, the first what the fuck evidential thing for me was when the second day we showed up, not having done any mediumship stuff yet. The first night we just did the pictures where we use our intuition to guess what they are and stuff like that. But the second day she's like, we're going to open up to mediumship today. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So we were just sitting in a circle and there was a couple people in the class that had been going there and they do a Monday night circle, which I'm part of now to continue developing. But most of us, there was only 10 of us. I'd say maybe 7 of us were absolutely new. So we're sitting in a circle and she's like, if you sense spirit, say what you see, what you hear, all the clairs, clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, all those. And just trust your gut, trust your intuition to just say what you see and hear or whatever. So I'm like, okay, so I'm sitting across from this girl. I'm like, I actually see a male spirit or a male soul. Now, it's not actually a physical body, but it's your imagination. You just imagine it behind them. And I'm like, I'm seeing a man, an older gentleman. I start describing him. But then I go, he's throwing a bowling ball over and over, which is a very odd thing to say, but all of this is, right? So I'm like, I'll just say it. She's like, yeah, he was a championship bowler. And I'm like, whoa, okay, that's weird. So then the next person comes around and because we just rotated and I'm like, and at this point, I'm just weirded out. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll continue going. And then I'm like, I'm hearing now. At this point, I'm hearing things. I'm hearing, watch the time, watch the time, watch the time, over and over again. And I'm like, that's a weird thing to hear. And she's like, well, I just found my grandmother's clock and I hung it up last week. So these are little things. And I'm like, okay, I'm still kind of skeptical at this point, but I'm like, still, these are evidential for me just beginning this and not having ever done it. Then and there was a few more things. Honestly, it was kind of all mind blowing. I forgot most of it, but these things stuck out to me. But then we got to where you hold an item in your hand and try and intuit what it is. So it was in an envelope. I had no idea what it was. It was kind of heavy. That's all I could tell. So she gave us about 2 minutes to jot down whatever comes to mind. And I'm just trusting myself, and I'm writing down, age, male, female, how they passed, relation, all the formal things that you figure out. But then I'm hearing loose, 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 like loud. So I wrote down loose, loose. So we finish, and she opens it up, and it was a bracelet. And she goes, this was my mother's, blah, 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 all the little formal details. And then I'm like, this is the one that really stuck out. She goes, her name was Lucy, but we called her Luce. And that was just like, my mind was blown. I'm like, so I was hearing this woman tell me her nickname. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a medium. And then it just kept going from there. But yeah.
Wow. And this was the first time you'd gotten mediumistic information. Like I hear some mediums talk about they'd wake up and their great grandma would be on their bed and they couldn't turn it off as children. You didn't have a childhood like that at all.
No, at the very least, there was a house that my grandparents lived in that they said was haunted. And I remember spending the night there, and I remember like the room getting cold and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But honestly, it didn't really freak me out. So maybe that's part of it. I was open to it and didn't know. But and like other things, like I thought I saw a man at the top of the stairs that was passed. Like, but I never thought anything of it. It was kind of like, it was probably just my imagination. But yes. It was my intuition and the whole dreams and synchronicities and deja vus that really led me to even, feel the need to, or the desire to rather, to take that next step and discover all this. So.
And when you were in the class, you said you heard the name Luce, or, it turned out to be a name. You saw the man, but with the bowling ball. How is it different than seeing? Like you're seeing me now through, Zencastr, you see people in person, you're hearing my voice. How in terms of sensations or experientially, was it different?
Yeah. So part of that trusting is, I think, allowing and letting go and surrendering and just allowing your intuition to take over whatever that means. So it could be, there's many ways to intuit information, So in the case of mediumship, you're kind of getting into that daydream state, and the impressions that come through are literal things you hear. But then when you see things, like in the case of like when I saw the male spirit, I actually see it like a light, just like a light body. Like they say it's like an outline of a person, and I'll just sense male or female and go from there. And then as soon as you acknowledge it, the information starts coming in. And that's when really it's just like when you think a random thought. That's how that comes in for me. It's just like, what's with, did you do this? And then, oh yeah, we did this, and it's validated that way, but it comes through as thoughts, and then you just say them. It comes through as like, you see things, you see actions, I'll give you an example. I won't give too much away, but I did a reading, and as soon as I connected with this woman, there was her grandma there in spirit. And I said, I see this woman. I described her to a T. And then I'm like, I see her like running alongside you, cheering you on. Was she like your biggest cheerleader? She must have been, and while she was alive. And she's like, yeah, she went to a lot of my stuff growing up in school and whatnot. And she said that. And then I go, who's Patricia? She goes, that's her. So it just comes in as thoughts. And then I go, wait, you ran track? And she's like, yeah. And I'm go, oh, it's her. She went to all your track meets and she's running next to you, cheering you on. She's like, yeah, she did that all the time. So it comes through as like, just, you see actions, you see, different symbols or literal things. And then it's just a matter of not interpreting them with your own experience and your own dogma, and leaving religion and spirituality out of it, really. And it's just about you connecting to that person on that level. And it really takes you and them to make that connection. I've done readings where I don't get anything. It's just like a wall. Whether that spirit doesn't have a message, or whether that is the person just is not ready to receive it. It's like, it's one of those things that mediums don't have answers to, but yeah.
How do you handle it when you get nothing? And how frequently does that happen?
So they say that all mediums are psychic and all psychics are mediums. I'm sure you've heard that. So at the very least,
all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So in that sense, if you do a mediumship reading with somebody and you're not getting anything, you can always read them psychically. Even if they have a wall up, you can read that negative energy they're holding or whatever it might be. So there's that.
And you tell them, I'm switching to psychic, I'm getting nothing mediumistically. So yes. People will know if an ethical medium suddenly switches to psychic. You're told. Okay.
Yes. I always start off reading the energy of the person. I find that me getting things right about them off the bat kind of gets that ball rolling for me and brings spirit in. That's my format. But yes. And then I'll say, well, I'm sensing a male in spirit here. Do you want me to go into mediumship? Some people don't. So.
Okay. And then how do you feel or experience the difference between psychic information versus mediumship information?
That's a good question because they're very similar, but I'd say mediumship is a little harder. And I'm sure as I get better, I'll get better and it'll get easier. But psychic stuff, now even besides like the cold reading stuff, when you look at a person, you can usually sense things about them. I think even if you're not psychic, you can do that. But then when you bring up
right. And that can be cold reading, even some people unintentionally do, Yes, that's why I noticed that I took classes. There were some people, I think, who unintentionally cold read. So
yeah. So you could definitely do that. If somebody looks depressed, you're going through a lot right now. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I see this happening in 2 years. You can make up anything. But when psychic information comes through, it's that verifiable, evidential information that like, I'm picking this up off you and this and this. Is your brother Todd? And then it's like, oh, okay. It verifies that at least whatever information is coming through is somewhat from not just me making it up and bullshitting, So you have to have both, I think.
Okay. And do you physically feel a difference, say, if you're getting an unintentional bit of cold reading? Like, I could look at a 40-year-old and say, I just know, like, it would just come into my head, you've lost a grandparent. And it'd be very unexpected if I wasn't right. And do you experience that differently, where the logical information's coming in? That I think we all varying degrees of intuitively pick up on, from micro expressions versus getting it through psychic?
Yeah. The way it feels different is mediumship is, it's deeper. It's a deeper connection, I feel. You know, I feel like maybe it's part of that is because you're concentrating more, maybe. Whereas like the proximity to a person, you know, reading energy off of them and whatnot might be a little bit easier. That's one theory. But it feels different in a sense that the psychic stuff, yeah, I would just say it tends to come easier, and it's just like it's in a flash, where the mediumship stuff comes more in symbols and you have to interpret it more.
Well, what about psychic versus logical, like unintentional logical? Again, like I was saying, I don't think I'm psychic. I mean, aside from the fact that they say everybody has little bits, but, you know, I do think we all read people's expressions and micro expressions, and we make lots of logical deductions. You know, as I gave the example, the 40-year-old who's lost a grandparent, to something that's maybe more subtle, you know, based on micro expressions or who knows what cues we're picking up unconsciously. What are you able to distinguish the difference between those two physiologically, or is it just that? How would you explain the difference between those two for you?
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was zero chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF Just Happened.
I think if you're trying to read, you're giving somebody a psychic reading, and you're not a psychic, you're a logic. So I know it's silly, but you're reading the cues, you're reading the body behavior, body movements, all that, just sensing their demeanor. Yeah. So if you're coming at a reading from logic, and you're reading all these cues from people and just guessing, I feel like it's harder to do that than just allow things to come in. So yeah, I guess if you're going to read somebody from that,
so it's easier, you're saying?
Yeah.
Like getting the psychic, it sort of pops in more naturally almost, or?
Yeah. When you're reading somebody's cues and all that, the things that pop in are obvious and they're clear just by looking at the person. Where it feels different, and where it is different than using logic with psychic stuff, is it comes in just more naturally. You don't even have to try. It just kind of comes in. Whereas like if you're logically looking at somebody, you're thinking and observing, and all of that's forming the picture of the person, rather than where psychic information comes in differently. Does that make sense?
Not in the sense I can relate to it experientially, but logically I can hear what you're saying and understand what you mean. Yeah, as someone who is not psychic. So now I want to get a little back to your journey. So you took the class and you were blown away. This was not something you ever identified as your abilities. And what was the next step? You continued taking classes, starting taking clients. Were there any other kind of crazy turning points between that class, developing this as your career, and then launching your podcast?
Well, it's all part of the journey, really. And I'm just continuing to learn and grow and develop my skills. And yes, I'm doing readings, and it's part of my thing now. And it's just a way to help people, you know, in any way I can. My channel, the information on there is meant to talk about the human condition and how we can navigate life with more ease, and really understand like what this journey is all about. So like, let's touch upon like the whole matrix thing real quick, like living in the matrix. When people talk about the matrix in real life.
And you touch upon that on your podcast, I know, which is very interesting because I'm absolutely fascinated by the matrix theories.
Yeah. So I made many videos on it, but it's really a way of describing like how we're trapped in systems. So there's many. There's government, corporate, religion, the media, like things that control how we think and live. This goes back to like questioning reality and what life is all about. And then you realize all these boxes you're put in and how to get out of them and like who's in control, and all these questions start to bubble up, right? So breaking out of the matrix, it doesn't mean you like go off the grid. It's more about waking up to the fact that there's more to life than we're being fed. So that's part of my channel. It's all about talking about all of these different philosophies and different belief systems and what the ancient cultures believed and how everything morphed into what it is today. Because if you trace it back, it's a lot of reused stories and reused myths and allegories. And it gets really interesting. But like in a nutshell, we have the matrix of government, seen as like a control system that limits our freedom through laws, politics, keeping us in compliance. And then there's like the religious matrix, which enforces belief systems and dogmas, preventing us from exploring spiritual truths. And then we have societal expectations, social media pushing this, consumerism, materialism, and all of that. So it's like, how do we break free from all this stuff? And then you have NDEs pop onto the scene, and these challenge the idea that we're just a physical body, right? Reinforcing belief that life is a matrix, really, because if we are souls having a human experience, then what is the goal of life? You know, to wake up from the illusion, as many cultures would say. Are you familiar with like the many cultures and their versions of a matrix of some sort?
No, my understanding of a matrix, I've only really had one understanding, and I guess that's based on that movie, you know, where, and the closest I've heard was the near-death experience. It's just the theory that either the simulation theory or that, as near-death experiences say, like our bodies are like virtual realities. Those are the only ways I've understood the matrix. So tell me more what you're meaning
Sure.
by it.
Yeah, so you have the whole continuity of consciousness, and that this physical world is all, you know, material world, and there's a spiritual world, and there's that whole matrix, and that we are born into this life. We forget who we were, going into like the soul contracts and all that near-death experiencers talk about. So that's part of the matrix. There's also like the whole aspect of a holographic reality and a holographic universe. Are you familiar with any of that?
I am. Yeah. Can you explain what you mean by it? And
Sure.
For our listeners too, because I don't think I've ever talked about it, but I've read a book about it.
Yeah. So I found out about the whole holographic universe theory from a CIA declassified paper called the Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, which was, this goes into ESP and psychic phenomenon. The CIA and the Department of Defense and many other acronyms looked into remote viewing for intel on the enemy back during the Cold War era. So they linked up with Robert Monroe, who was a leading researcher in out-of-body experiences and astral projection, who formed the gateway process. And in this paper, they talk a lot about consciousness and where it all stems from and what we are and what everything is. What is reality? So the holographic universe theory posits that our 3D reality is a projection from a deeper, more, I guess, fundamental layer of existence, like how a hologram would work. So connecting to quantum physics, where experiments show that particles are interconnected in ways that defy traditional understanding of space and time. So at a deeper level, everything is linked in a unified field, essentially. They call it the absolute. But the analysis and assessment of the gateway process found some pretty mind-blowing stuff. suggesting that consciousness is connected to the absolute, which is like the ultimate source of everything. So the idea is that we're all part of a holographic matrix, meaning the reality we experience is kind of like a projection from this deeper, unified field of energy. On top of that, the universe itself is seen like a burst of creation and then eventually returns to a black hole. So the diagrams in this paper are really interesting. It posits that the universe emanates from a white hole and expands out and falls back into itself in a black hole, which is pretty interesting.
That is fascinating, but it takes many, many years to birth from the white hole and fall into the black hole. That would, I assume, be trillions of years, multiple planets and evolutions. Do you think there's a multiverse and other universes?
I mean, I'm sure there is. I mean, we're just humans with our little brains trying to think about this stuff. I mean, I think anything's possible. Have I had any experience of it? No. I think like people like to say you can quantum shift to a parallel reality. And I think that's kind of the new age taking things too far, maybe. Like, I like to think we create reality based on our mental state, and how everything's mental, really. If you look at the laws of the universe and mentalism, the first law of the universe is mental. So everything is a creation of our thoughts, beliefs, and we use our five senses in our brain to perceive reality. And we don't have all the answers, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, our senses give us a tiny portion of reality based on, I guess near-death experiences, they say they have 360-degree vision and this whole other level of senses. And we already know dogs have senses, we don't. So I can only imagine that's sort of the tip of the iceberg, at least I think. Sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to actually ask you another question, but if you have something to say related to what I just said, feel free.
Well, I want to go back to like a lot of what I talk about is the whole human condition and duality and how to make sense of the world, because we lose people, horrible things happen to us, and there's a big divide between religion and other belief systems that aren't tied to dogma, that are more experiential. And when you look at things like the holographic universe, and you look at things like Plato's allegory of the cave, where prisoners are chained to a wall and all they see is shadows cast by a fire on the wall, and they think that's reality. And then Hinduism has Brahman and Atman. There's the one, and then there's the soul, and we're all fragments and return to it. So every culture has their own version of this. And it's like, well, what are we doing here? Right? So a lot of what I talk about is the human condition and duality and what life is all about. So there's darkness and there's light. So whether we perceive those things as angels and demons or back to the universe as mental, and these are aspects of ourselves. And it's just part of the way we're designed to experience reality. NDErs who experience these revisiting their soul contracts and life reviews will tell you that we plan this whole life, all the pivotal points in our life are planned out and we have free will around those points, which I like to think is true because it just makes sense. Based on the fact that you have people experiencing this that didn't come from any dogmatic belief system. And that's the beauty of having thousands of NDEs, is it gets to show what the human condition really is all about. And it's one of duality. We experience the light and the dark, good and evil, but really it's all the same. Going back to... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry.
I was just going to say that going back to like these theories about consciousness and life after death and all that. When you look into these other stories, I like to talk about the Gnostic tradition a lot because they
What
have,
is that?
it's very interesting. So the Gnostics were a sect of Christianity that there's many forms that diverged out, but basically the Gnostics have their own belief about the creation of this universe and what we're meant to do as human beings and how it was created through the allegory of Sophia. And Sophia is an aeon in the story of the Gnostics. You have the aeons, which are like the angels, and you have the archons, which are like the demons or the dark forces. So the allegory of Sophia, it's called the Pistis Sophia, the story, is Sophia, who in Gnostic teachings is a divine figure. Her name represents wisdom. And the story goes that she wanted to create something on her own. She wanted to experience something beyond what is called in the Gnostic tradition the pleroma, which is basically like she's with the one or source or the absolute or whatever you want to call it. But she wants to create something and experience something else. So in doing so, she unintentionally creates this material world. And it's imperfect. And it's created by an archon called the demiurge or Yaldabaoth in the Gnostic tradition. Now, I know this is all weird words and it's out there, but
No, it sounds like fables, that tells allegories, that tell, I mean, I think there's truth and wisdom to stories like this, even if it's not fact of the details,
Right. So we can tie this back to NDEs in the end. So basically you have you have Sophia. She creates Yaldabaoth, or the demiurge, who creates this flawed material world, which is not the pleroma. It's not the perfect heaven, so to speak. It has duality. There's death and rebirth and the cycles of life, that have to turn to evolve, whatever the creation is, and it's one of duality. But in the story of Sophia, there's the veil of forgetfulness, which ties back to soul contracts and NDEs and like what we came here to do and all this. So the veil of forgetfulness, the idea that when we're born into this material world, we pass through a veil, so to speak, that makes us forget who we are. Spiritual beings having a human experience. So it goes, we forget our connection to the divine, our past lives, and the bigger picture of why we're here. And this forgetfulness is part of the duality. So Sophia's creation brought it about almost like a reset button, making sure we focus on the lessons in this life rather than being bogged down by every experience we've ever had, with the hope of returning back to the source with, a job well done. And we came to and learned everything we were meant to. But it's interesting because you have good and evil aspects. You have angels and demons, and you have what sets them apart is the Gnostics, believe that the material world is flawed and it needs to be transcended. Whereas I think in reality, it's one of duality on purpose to learn these lessons. The joys, the sorrows, the pain, all that helps us grow. But even the Gnostic tradition has this ideal of the veil of forgetfulness and forgetting what we came here to do and forgetting who we are and rediscovering that through gnosis, which means like a direct experience to these things, with these things. And not relying on just blind faith, but actually seeking knowledge and knocking on that door and asking the questions, And that helps us remember who we are. So where they got it wrong, so to speak, is that the material world's all bad, But I think that allegory, yes, it's an allegory, is interesting because this is from thousands of years ago and it ties into what people experience in NDEs, among other things in the Bible,
Interesting. And so with this veil of forgetfulness, and I've heard about it before, Why do you think it has to be so extreme, though, where we don't really, unless you start delving really, really deep, we don't have evidence of an afterlife? Like, really, the whole logical perception is that our consciousness is created by a brain, and this is it. And when we die, that's it. And there's nothing to compare. I mean, yes, there is the evidence, but it takes a lot to find it. And why do you think it's set up where we're so left to think either, very, very belief-based religions that really, with all due respect, don't have any logical reason to think they would be true, or to think that when you die, you die? Why isn't there more of, like, except for very few people like mediums, why is the veil so thick where all of us aren't having a little bit more of mediumistic experiences in and out on a regular basis?
Well, a huge part of that stems from the way the world is designed. We're a fast-paced, we're all fighting to survive nowadays. People don't have time to think about, how am I going to connect to my higher self today? Or, let me take 10 minutes to write down my dreams every morning. Or these things that connect us back to our purpose and who we are and discovering who we are. So part of that is, as soon as we're born into these matrices: government, society, school, religion. They tell us what to do, how to act, and what to think, and don't question. And then you have, and I'm going to side tangent on religion real quick, because I have a problem with, like, the way it's done sometimes. So, like, evangelists will tell you, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, repent, And I don't think it's such a fear-based religion, which I talk about a lot, because it's very important for people to wake up to the truth that's hidden beneath a lot of this stuff. But why do we forget? And why is the veil so thick? Because going back to our limited human experience and what we can understand, if we're infinite beings, this is just one construct. Time is an illusion within this space-time construct, and it's just a blip, and it's one experience, and then we have infinite others. So this is just one where the veil's thick, you could say. But I will say that there are mediums with evidential information that comes through, and there's a lot of this stuff that's coming out now that is thinning the veil, so to speak. And I think that going back to ancient cultures' beliefs merging with modern science, this stuff is going to really propel in the next few years, I feel. I think that people are going to really start to question stuff more. They are already. Look at the world. And back to cycles in this material universe and the cycles that have to happen, you can go back to, we're moving out of the age of Pisces into Aquarius. And with that comes the advent of technology and all of these things that are actually happening in the real world. So I think the veil is going to continue to thin. But yeah, it's just part of this experience. And we get little hints and little Easter eggs and little glitches in it to help us realize that this isn't it, and that, man, it would suck if this was it, because there's got to be a purpose to it,
And other cultures have, from what I understand, have a lot more connection to other dimensions and other states of consciousness. Like, it sounds like indigenous cultures do. I read a book, I think it was called like Faces in the Smoke, about, it was years ago, I think maybe 80s, early 90s, but very westernized journalist went to do a documentary on an indigenous, at that point, fairly untouched indigenous tribe. And they just had remarkable psychic abilities. It was before cell phones. We even had cell phones, but they didn't even have, I guess, what everyone had back then, regular phones. And they would get psychic intuitions of when they were supposed to meet up with each other, and it would work. And just crazy, like, just this way that we cannot begin to understand. So, but we've also set up technology so we don't ever have to use those intuitions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a fear-based culture, and it's all about materialism and consumerism. And when you look into who you are and you start to confront your ego, which, I talk about ego death on my channel, and yes, you need ego, obviously. Like, we're not totally killing our ego, but those aspects of us that we need to shed to become better is really important. Also ties into that is shadow work. Are you familiar with shadow work at all?
I know the name, but I don't know what's involved with it. Is it similar to therapy where you're facing like your worst days and worst parts of yourself in some way? Am I right in that?
A little bit. But shadow work is basically, we all have a shadow, and it's the dark aspects of ourselves that we need to make conscious. So these are the repressed fears, traumas, desires, things that people have as part of their human condition, those things that maybe we don't want. But what you'll notice is, like, going back to synchronicities and stuff, I've realized this in my own life, maybe you have too, is when you're going through a problem or you're trying to deal with a situation or a personal conflict, those things confront you head on. It's almost like you magnetize them. And then that goes back to like lessons we learned, like we're attracting these lessons maybe, and it ties into the other laws of the universe too, the laws of attraction and correspondence and all these. But shadow work is those parts of you that you need to work on. And what you'll notice is life will throw them at you sometimes in synchronous ways, and to watch out for those, because they're kind of pointers like, hey, this is here, pay attention to it. And part of integrating our shadow is individualization, which is becoming whole and realizing who we are. It all goes back to that whole aspect too.
And if this is personal, you don't have to answer it, but is there a synchronicity you've experienced that was the biggest synchronicity? Or did you already answer that with the white horse? Or is there
that
something
sure was
else
a big
that
one.
comes? Okay.
Yeah, that was a big one. There's been a lot of numerology too. And I know when you see numbers, it's like, yeah, numbers show up everywhere every day. It's going to be 1111 twice a day. But when they show up in uncanny ways, like not on a clock or in a book, just weird ways, you hear it right when you were just thinking about it. It's when and how it comes through that makes it serendipitous, So pay attention to those. But the biggest synchronicity, definitely the horse thing, no numerology. I will say one of the weirdest deja vus I've had is a deja vu where you've never been to that place or around that person before ever. So you have a deja vu where, you're with your family and, oh, I remember this and it happened like this, no biggie, like whatever. But I've had a few where I'm like, oh, I'm in a deja vu right now. And like, I had one when I was on a work trip to Washington State, never been there before. And we were pulling into the facility and I'm like, whoa, I've been here before, like driving through this parking lot. And I remembered it perfectly. And it's like, how do you remember something you've never been to, So stuff like that.
What do you think is the cause of deja vu?
Man, I wish I had the answer to this. I think it ties back to dreams, honestly, because most of them, I feel like I recall, like, I remember dreaming this like a relative time frame ago. Like it'd always be like, I'll have the deja vu and I'm like, I feel like I jumped this like 6 months ago or something. But time is an illusion. So in the dream state, maybe when we're in these lower brainwave states and we're tapping into other dimensions, other realities, other altered states of consciousness, maybe we're getting glimpses of the future, which in the case of my dreams, it seems so.
Now, one episode you had was about tips for dealing with assholes. And I think that's something we all deal with. What's a good tip for that?
Sure. Yeah, that's something everyone faces. And I think the best way to handle it is to stay grounded in your own energy. So when somebody's throwing negativity your way, bad mood, drama, toxic vibes, whatever it might be, try not to get sucked into it and stay centered. So it's about being solid in who you are, really. Who you are and living authentically, dealing with the parts of yourself that need healing. All of this goes into dealing with assholes because people reflect back to you what you're reflecting to them. That's the mirror principle. And test this out in your own life. You'll find that when you're in a bad mood, things just don't go right. It's like, oh, and the hits keep coming, that whole thing. You really do attract what you focus on. So with dealing with assholes, yeah, don't get sucked into their drama and their negative energy. You know, you have energy vampires, these narcissists, these people that victimize others and basically feed off of their good energy to make themselves feel better. So yeah, shadow work ties into it. And a lot of people know how to trigger you and push your buttons because they're bringing up something unresolved within you. So that's part of shadow work too. Understanding that sometimes the reason somebody's negativity affects you so much is because it's hitting a sore spot in your own shadow, basically. So once you start working on that, you notice those same things don't bother you as much. So you respond with awareness rather than unconsciously. And then letting go of the negativity that pulls you down to stay grounded and firm in your own authenticity is part of it.
Now, why are people assholes? I mean, we all are at some point. Like, I'm sure you and I, and just the sweetest person you've ever met, has some moments they just were not their best selves and were rude to people. But that's part of being a human. But what makes people full? I mean, you worked in prisons, and yes, there is a percentage of the population that's tragically falsely accused. But also, there's a lot of people who do really evil things, and you were face to face with that. What makes people like what overall cross the boundary from a nice person who has some human grouchy, not their best self moments into a truly horrible person, a rapist, a murderer? And I'm assuming those were the people you were directly around, people who did those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm still there. So I'm still around people like this. And I tell
You're
you,
still working there. Wow.
yep. And I tell you, it's the craziest thing because you can look into a person's eyes and tell a lot about them. And you can look into some of these people that have done heinous crimes' eyes and it's empty. And it makes me wonder what happened to people. And it always stems from the quote, hurt people, which is so true because we all have our trauma and our difficulties. And man, given the state of the world and the generations, past few generations of what we've grown up through, I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So yeah, people are pissed off here and there and nothing's ever good enough. And people take that out on others. And there's no empathy and compassion and realization that there's that ripple effect. You know, it really does ripple out. And it all starts with you know? But yeah.
How, as someone who now has developed your psychic mediumship abilities, are you able to be around that energy? I mean, a lot of the mediums I know are like, oh, I've got to leave this room. That one person has bad energy. And those people are usually not violent criminals. They might be unkind or just not necessarily people you want in your life, complainers, and they have a hard time being around even people like that. So how do you handle being around just some of the people who've crossed into the darkest ways of living as a human, I guess is the kindest way to say it?
Well, first and foremost, I treat everyone the same. And I think that's really important because you have no idea what people have been through. But at the same time, treat others as you want to be treated. So if you're going to be a certain way to me, I got nothing for you. You know, it's that type of thing. I'm not going to go above and beyond for somebody that is saying absolutely horrible things to you. I mean, that's just common sense. But yeah, when it comes to these people in jail and prison that have done these things, the trauma or upbringing that they've gone through, it's so important to look at a kid's upbringing. So much of a child's psyche is formed in their childhood years, and some people are given a bad set of circumstances and aren't given the discipline and the morals and the right outlook on life, and they divert from the normal path, as you would say. So you're going to have duality. You're going to have you're going to have people that are wrongfully convicted and those that are rightfully convicted. You're going to have, people that have done heinous things that maybe can become better people. And there are going to be those that get worse. That's just the reality we live in. So when dealing with assholes, it's important to treat everyone the same. Look at it from what they might be going through, putting yourself in those shoes, and that's where empathy comes in, a little bit of compassion, Yes, life is imperfect, but it's not going to be. So how can we all get along? How can we all make each other's lives better?
I want to ask you, I was planning to ask you about stuff you've learned from your guests, but now knowing about your prison experience, is there anything you've learned from any of the prisoners? What's the biggest lesson you've learned?
That's a great question. Well, part of it is working there has helped me discover my own gifts better. So that's been a huge thing. And it all goes back to life happening for you, not to you, which I really try and keep that outlook on life. But the biggest lesson would be just how evil the world is and how we can come to terms with that. Because we all want to live a nice, cushy life and not have to think about these things, but they're out there. So, yeah, it's been a huge catalyst for my own personal development. I've had to confront people at their worst, saying things to me that are horrible, just seeing things that are absolutely horrible. So those types of things teach you a lot of lessons in general, beyond the inmates, the environment.
You said how evil the world is. Do you think the world is equally good as well?
Yeah. And I think it's all, like I was saying earlier, it is really all one and the same. It's relative. It's all part of this experience. But when you're around these people and you know what they did or how they did it, it's different. It's a different kind of evil. It's things you didn't know a human could do, that type of thing. So yeah, that's, if that gives better context.
Yeah. Do you get like psychic or mediumistic downloads about suddenly you'll know what one of them did, even if you haven't read their file or been told, or do you suddenly know things that happened to them through your abilities that happened to them that made them that way?
I've never really tried to read an inmate too closely, but just the general energy, so to speak, I keep a barrier up for sure. And before I go into work, I intentionally, like, just in my head, block anything out. Setting that intention is very important. So when I get into work, yeah, I'm a human. I'm bothered by people's drama and negativity, but I really do try and stay light and be positive through all of it. because the ripple effect, and that's huge. But with the inmates, I can read. Yeah, there's definitely times I can tell what they've done just by looking at them. Other times, back to the eye thing, just looking into their eyes, I can tell if they're, just made some mistakes and they're actually a really good person, that type of thing. And when you talk to these people, they're human beings like everyone else, obviously. And when they open up to you and tell you their stories, it starts to make sense a little bit why they've done what they've done, but still, yeah.
Yeah, there's almost a way of remaining humble and being like, if I had been confronted and had the childhood they had, and in no way I'm excusing it, no way saying there shouldn't be consequences, but it's easy to sit here and say I am a better human. I would never, ever have done that. I haven't been presented with the level of cruelty in life. I haven't had a perfect life, but I most likely have not faced what they faced or been treated the way they treated or lacked the love. I mean, I had in many ways a very cushy and loving life. In other ways, there were challenges, but so I think, yeah, there's some way maybe none of us should feel superior to others in that sense. Protect yourself and people need consequences and you don't excuse it, but would I be any better? I've never been tested like that. Who's to say, So, now I want to ask you, but we're get a little bit back to your podcast. Is there any guests you've had or people you've spoken to or things you learned to share on it that shocked you the most, that you were just like, no, there's no way that this could be true, and you delved in and it completely impacted how you thought?
I've only had some sidekicks on, and John Burke, who I told you about. I had the sidekicks on Humanfluence before I took the course, and I took the course at their establishment. So I'm glad I reached out to them and went down that path. And in that podcast, I basically was talking about intuition and just main skeptical questions for psychics. And at that point, I didn't really think anything more than that. But I'm glad I did that to sign up for the course. And then John Burke was interesting because he related all of these NDE experiences back to biblical scripture, which ties back to how NDEs have all of these universal aspects, and whether they're in religion or not, many people experience the same things. And that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of the Bible a little bit more, because I like to talk about religion quite a bit. I'm not religious, so to say, but I'm more spiritual. But I like to break down the Bible and really look at what it means esoterically and the allegories, what they actually mean. And then I've been getting really into the history of how the church evolved and how the Bible was written. And when you start to go back in history and uncover these things, it paints a really interesting picture of how we came to worship what we do today. And all of the holidays are centered around different things that are related to it that people don't understand. And all of the symbolism throughout culture and movies and whatever else that people don't understand. So I like to speak about all these too, because there's deeper truths there that people should know.
And obviously they can go to your podcast to hear in depth about this, but what's one example that you think, I don't even know how to ask it because I know so little about the Bible, but like, what is one example of something that's a fact that people find really interesting that, or thought you have on that?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, there's a couple things. First of all, people should look into Genesis, the first chapter of the Bible, and look at the original translation, because it paints a different picture of the creator of the universe. Secondly, I would say the book of Revelation is deeply tied to astrotheology and the stars, which people don't realize. They think that Jesus is going to descend and take only 144,000 people to heaven, which I break down what that means too. I think little things like that, those two examples just to start with, are really important because they paint a picture of how the Bible was revised over time to what it is today and what the original meaning is. And that'll get you down a rabbit hole. And then to look at Revelation and what that means from a spiritual standpoint and from an astrotheological standpoint. Again, it's all symbolism and allegories. Most of it's not literal, but too many people take all these things literally, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. And then pass laws on each other based on it and try to impose and force and shame. Yeah. That is really unfortunate. But, if there wasn't the Bible, people would probably be doing it through something else. It's probably human nature and if it's not one book, it's another. It was probably done, or in fact, you can read it was done under the name of Zeus. So, it's just human nature. You take these allegories, and at least my thought, and people kind of come up with their understandings, and then not everybody, of course, but then, try to force laws, even, you get countries or places where there's honor killings, killings based in religion. We kill based in religion too here. That's very, I think, sadly, human nature and aspects of it, the worst of it, So we're going on past an hour and 15 minutes. Do you have a little more time, or do you need to jump off?
I do, yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you how, since discovering your abilities, starting your podcast, talking to some other people, reading, delving in, how has your worldview changed from today versus, let's say, like 10 years ago or before starting all this journey?
Yeah, so I basically grew up just learning in life as we go, and I basically thought there was a God or something that created everything, and I thought there was maybe like a good place and a bad place you go, but I thought most people go to heaven, only really bad people go to hell. That was kind of always my belief growing up, right? Then when I started to really look into NDEs about 3 years ago, that's when I really dug into like Jesus and judgment and God being all loving rather than, you learn about life reviews and you judge yourself and it's not God and all this. And I'm like, all this is churning in my brain. And then fast forward to my mediumship stuff. So I went from basically thinking, it's close to the Christian belief system. The only thing I've always been iffy on is the whole Son of God thing, God in flesh thing. That was always the one thing that got in the way of my totally believing all that. So I went from that to now, where between my life experience of deja vu, synchronicities, prophetic dreams, and psychic mediumship, I really think that this is but an illusion, so to speak. It's one experience, and when we die, so many people talk about how when they die, it's just like near-death experiences. It's like taking off an old coat. It's like you're home. It's like, you're one with God or source or whatever you call it. And that started to make more sense to me. Like, if it's true that I'm speaking to people's deceased loved ones and bringing through verifiable information, and if it's true that I've had these dreams that have come to fruition in the future, and I've had these uncanny synchronicities, then yeah, it's all blatant. There's something more than this reality, and this is, whether it's time's an illusion, this whole reality is an illusion, however you want to put it, it's one experience. And when we die, on to the next one, whatever that may be. That's what I think now.
I think that's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like me to? Anything else you want to add that you haven't had a chance?
No, thank you, Liz. We covered a lot, and I appreciate all your great questions and the time. And I do have some books. Can I show
Of
my books real
course, of
quick?
course. Yeah, my last question is always where we can find you and anything you want them to read or listen to. So yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. So I have, this is Solutions, and this is my big book. And this is like your esoteric handbook of the human
And it's
condition.
called Solutions to confirm, because a lot of people listen on audio only. So I want to make sure everyone gets, okay.
Yep, Solutions, SOUL. And it's about transforming your life through esoteric wisdom. So this is like a culmination of all the starting knowledge, I guess, to kind of dip your toes into this without going too crazy. And I cover everything from duality, which we've touched a lot about, to religion and religious dogma, and how all religions throughout history have all kind of said the same thing and how so. But I also go into the psychic medium stuff and extrasensory perception, dreams, and all this fun stuff. And at the back, I have photos. Like I was talking about in that course I did, you can basically focus on the photo without looking at it. There's a spot for you to intuit what you think the image is using your clairs, and then you can flip it over and see how you did. So I have a bunch of stuff like that in there too. Besides that, I have Spirit Over Matter, which is about duality and spiritualizing the material world. Mind Field, which is all about how we create our reality with our thoughts, beliefs, intentions, and actions. And I also have a lucid dreaming ebook called Lucid Keys. And as far as my channel, Humanfluence on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, humanfluence.org. And you can look up Joe Leposa on Amazon to pull up my books.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.
To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?